Welcome, everyone, to the Captive Audience. It is the 9th of July. I'm Kevin Hoare, and I'm here with, I want to make sure I say your last name right. Andy Hugh.
Huey.
Huey. You do say the E? Okay, just wanted to make sure of that, because if I can get it right once, I can get it right again, believe it or not. Andy is the Young Republicans of Oregon state secretary. And he also was previously on the Captive Audience as a candidate. I think it was for State Senate District 29. Did I have the number right?
That is correct.
And unsuccessful, I think, but in the primary. But hats off to you for running, because actually that's what young Republicans are doing, is they're developing great new Republicans, great future Republicans who inevitably will be the future of the party. Out there setting examples and showing what leadership really is. And so thank you for doing that. But welcome to the show, Andy.
Thanks for having me back on, and I'm glad to be here representing the Young Republicans of Oregon.
So we got some topics. Andy kind of lined up everything here. I might drop in a thing here or there, but he got us a bit of an agenda going, and so why don't we'll go with that. And I think the first thing you had on the list, if I recall, was about top Democrats sticking with President Biden as the party nominee. It's a Willamette Week article. I think it needs to be revised, because I actually saw it earlier, and it said 3 of the 4 members of Oregon's Democrat caucus in the House, Suzanne Bonamici, Val Hoyle, and Andrea Salinas, didn't respond to Willamette Week's question. However, Val Hoyle did go on local television in the Eugene area and staunchly stated her support for Joe Biden, and wanted everyone to know it. So we will give her full credit for saying that he's the best candidate, because that's what, even though she didn't reply to the Willamette Week, she's probably a little butthurt over the frankly award-winning reporting that you get from Willamette Week by one of the other reporters, Sophie Peel, who is the one who has put out most of the stories about LaMotta and Val Hoyle and her pay-to-play scheme, for which she is now under a federal investigation by the Department of Justice, and it couldn't happen to a nicer, more corrupt career politician. So anyway, coming back to the story, Andy.
Well, it's funny that we're talking about Val Hoyle and that this whole story broke today. One of our communications chair, Chris Gray, who's been around and getting involved in a lot of politics, has specifically made comments and reels about this, even on our own podcast, especially following the whole scandals that happened with Shamia Fagan, and then we lead it into what happened with Val Hoyle. It's showing a corruption that's existing within the Democratic Party. And even with everybody choosing to stay behind Biden, we're seeing this and questioning. The large question is, why are you guys going to continue to support somebody who you guys are even commenting that won't last for another 4 years? He won't be able to finish his own term. And you're not only having private meetings with him, but you saw how mentally incompetent he was. And that is where we're questioning things. So and this is showing the larger system of corruption within the Democratic Party. Even their own delegates are struggling to support Biden because he's not able to last 4 more years. And that was a large article that even just came out of Politico. And even more funny, just even talking with corruption, we're seeing the new poll that is coming out, and Scanner News reported this, that it came out of a poll from Bryn Dixon and Amani. I don't know that pollster personally, but it's showing a national poll of 1,000 likely voters that occurred between the 2nd and the 6th of this month, that Kamala Harris was up one point by Trump, but with a Hillary Clinton at the top of the ticket was up 2 points. They're struggling to find their own candidates, and even with that, having Biden at the top of the ticket is a guarantee that it's going to be a Republican-led country in a few months.
Well, and that's one of the things, is they don't really care that he is mentally gone. if they thought that a cadaver an embalmed cadaver could be leading Trump by 10 points, they'd be like, best candidate, let's vote for him, let's all support him. They're fine with that because they know that Donald Trump would actually really change things in DC, and especially with the Republican Congress. And that is, the Senate is kind of likely because of what happened in West Virginia, where that's going to flip from Joe Manchin to the current governor of West Virginia, who's a former Democrat, now a Republican, and has been for a while. It's a conservative state, which takes a 51-49 Senate and makes it instantly a 50-50 Senate. And then when you win the presidency, you have the tie-breaking vote. So right there, the U.S. Senate is got a very good chance of being in Republican hands. And then obviously there's other races that we got to watch. But the House of Representatives is a big deal. Oregon can affect that. We have 3 races here that can affect the outcome of that. And Democrats in the House are where the biggest rumblings are occurring, where Democrats are concerned, especially the vulnerable ones, that they are tied to a rock, that he's going to drag them down and they're going to lose the House more than they are behind now, which is just a few seats, but maybe by something more epic, and lose seats that they don't expect to lose, that are ones they thought they would hold on to forever. And 2 of those are here in Oregon, the 5th district and the 4th district.
Yeah, it's confusing too. We're seeing just across the river here, where we have Washington's, I believe it's the 3rd congressional district, Murray Gluesenkamp Perez, who has restarted the Blue Dog Caucus specifically with a few other Democrats there, and it's just completely. She's one of the few who's come out against Biden already. You're having the vulnerable Democrats continuing to come out against Biden, and we're watching and saying, why is the regular party not coming against this? You're looking at this, and the reason that there's been previous wins have been not from your own party, but have become you flipped independent votes. And a lot of these independents, especially in Oregon, have grown under Democratic policies, and a lot of them have fled the Democratic Party.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
You're seeing the rot at the head. That's where you get everything down, especially in the Democratic Party. The head of the party is the one who controls everything.
Yeah, I was in Cresswell, which is a small town outside of Eugene that holds a massive 4th of July parade. It's like probably 12,000 people, I would guess, maybe showed up for that. Quite a few. And we encountered, there was a small Biden entrant that I heard later got booed out of the parade. This is a suburb of Eugene. Got booed out of the parade. We saw them earlier, and I'm like, what are you doing? I mean, don't even do that. Pretend like he's not in, and then just hope for the best. But there was also, of course, Monique Despain was in the parade. There wasn't an explicit Republican entrant, but there were several Republican candidates in. And then there was RFK Jr., who was very interested. He was coming over and talking to Monique's folks and others. And in talking to them, the one thing that stood out is that every last one of them was a former Democrat. One of them said that she'd been a Democrat for 49 years. And she just had enough. She's like, they're corrupt. Now, they didn't get that impression by watching MSNBC. And so something triggered them. And I didn't really have a lot of time to talk to them. And yes, Eugene is 50 square miles surrounded by reality. So a lot of the stuff in the area is not near as liberal as Eugene. But a lot of the attendees are from Eugene that go to these parades. And still, it was right on the heels of the debate performance a week later. And these folks were explaining to us better than I think we've been able to explain why they have had it with not just Joe Biden, but the Democrat Party. And now this is going to get worse, because if they actually do try to replace Biden, there are millions of Democrats who are offered one choice in the primary, Joe Biden. And they dutifully voted for him. And then someone else, some party elites, in order to save democracy, are going to go and potentially choose someone else for them. And yes, the system does exist for doing that. But I think I'm done with the lectures about saving democracy by the Democrat Party when they're going to go and tell millions of Democrats who voted democratically for Joe Biden that we found a new nominee for you. Now, they can't do it easily without Joe Biden agreeing. That is really the crux to the issue right now. And I think they might be stuck with him. But there is an active debate, and you pointed this out. So Oregon's Democrats, they are lockstep sticking with President Brandon there, or Bronze Brandon as we know him now, because he got the spray tan recently. However, there are congressional Dems that are having a robust debate about this. And that's one of the articles that you provided here. There's also the poll that you mentioned where they're squirming around trying to see if other combos would work. Believe it or not, as hopeless as Kamala Harris really is in so many ways, and has typically been below Biden in the polling, Kamala Harris is actually looking a little bit better than Joe Biden. That is not a strength of Joe Biden, sign of strength of Harris. It is a sign of strength, a failure of Joe Biden, and a sign of desperation on the part of the Democrats who have created this situation for themselves. Now, here's two other articles I'll just mention really quick. One is that I think it's Mark. Is it Mark Penn?
Are you talking about the Dean Phillips?
No, Mark Penn. He's a pollster, and he was on Fox News after Biden declared he was staying in the race in a phone call to Morning Joe, which that guy used to be a Republican. I mean, dear Lord. Anyway, and he said that he thought it would actually be suicide for the Democrats to replace Biden. And that he said that's the end of it. Biden says he's staying in. The debate is over. Clearly, the debate is not over, but maybe the possibility of replacing him is. Now, you mentioned about Dean Phillips. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Dean Phillips there?
Well, Dean Phillips, for those who don't know, he was one of the few Democrats that actually ran this cycle as a Democrat in the primaries. And he was the only one from the Congress that chose to do so. So he left Congress and chose to run. As the failed candidate, he hadn't mentioned anything about the electability of Joe Biden, and he made a comment on today that if this has ever been a vindication has never been so unfulfilling. Specifically talking about, and he has criticized specifically during his entire point of his campaign, that Biden's age is a long shot during this campaign, and especially since that shaky debate performance, it's rather cryptic.
Yeah. People were already concerned about his age before the debate performance, but many were willing to accept or believe that he could handle. But I don't know. Clearly, the media has let a lot of these people down, because the media, especially CNN and MSLSD, were showing these guys stuff that was omitting just how disastrous the Biden really is. It was being shown everywhere else. Everyone else saw it if they wanted to see it. And it was on social media. You really couldn't miss it there. But they just dismissed it as disinformation. And actually what they were getting was selective information, which is the equivalent of disinformation. As you mentioned, Dean Phillips, who was in the primary against him, he's a Minnesota guy, a congressman. And I think there are people that are going to use this as an opportunity to teach a lesson to the Democrat Party. And I'm talking about Democrats. This might be what it is. Now, Dick Durbin, Senator Dick Dirtbag is what I've always called him because that's what he is. Said it remains to be seen if Biden should still be the presidential nominee. That's right below on the same day. Dean Phillips came out with his statement, and that's in Politico. This seems to be, in my opinion, has momentum. This has legs. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, exactly. We've had so many different conversations that have occurred, especially the Democrat circles have had some too. You have the largest supporters. A lot of the people that are making the political donations have made a movement to stop donating to President Biden and have him leave the ticket because they were worried about
Trump already. In going into the debate, he was Trump when the conviction happened and everybody saw how bogus that was. Trump raised $300 million and passed Biden. So now Biden isn't just seeing the debate. He's not only behind in donations, but he's going to lose moment. I think the next report, which actually June 30th is the end of the quarter, we will see in about 6 days what his money looks like, because that's when all the stuff comes public, is about 15 days after the end of the quarter. And I don't think it's going to look very good for Joe Biden. I think we're going to see a crash and burn, and that's not even going to reflect fully the slowdown in donations that happened after the debate, as donors are saying. Yeah. And by the way, there's a CNN data guru, which I think is an oxymoron in terms, but I posted it here, says that he would take a roll of the dice on Kamala Harris if he were a Democrat donor. So they've got pollsters, data gurus going on CNN advising donors to take a chance on someone other than Joe Biden. That is not a way to solve the Joe Biden issue. That's going to accelerate all of this. And he said that if you take a look at an average of the polls, in fact, Kamala does slightly better than Joe Biden against Donald Trump, while Joe Biden is trailing Donald Trump by 3 points nationally in an average of polls, which doesn't, Kamala Harris is only trailing Donald Trump by a single point. And the reason for that is, remember, we have the left part of the country Democratic, we have the right part of the country Republican, but elections tend to be one in the middle amongst independents. Well, here's the thing. Donald Trump never led in any poll in 2019 or 2020. And you saw how close the election was. It is telling that he is leading in every poll, even when they try to find other people to run against him in hypothetical polls. So Joe Biden's a certain loser the way things are now, but in fact, we know that the polls undercount. And somebody asked here, like, can we believe the polls or their Democrat polls? Even the ones that are sort of middle of the road, there were only a few exceptions. Trafalgar was one of the polls that actually got it pretty much right in 2020 and said all this nonsense about being down 17% in Wisconsin was garbage. And so I think that someone would have to actually take a lead over Trump, significant lead, probably like 4 to 5 points outside the margin of error, before you could start giving any credence to someone being able to beat Trump right now, the mess that the Democrats are in. At least that's what I'm saying.
No, exactly. And it's even getting more weird as we're watching things. We had just recently Peter Doocy, I believe it was Peter Doocy, who was asking this to the White House press secretary, which we have seen lie and lie and lie again. And specifically, this was about showing with the White House guest visitors logs, having a neurologist come visit. And the question was, can you tell us if this was for President Biden or not? And
it was a Parkinson's specialist,
to not even mention that.
And I think it was a Parkinson's specialist who had been there 10 times.
Exactly.
You don't bring a Parkinson's specialist in to do an exam. I saw a discussion or listened to a discussion of this. Dr. What's his name on Fox? Older guy, really fair and straight down the middle on his comments usually. And he said, if you're a neurologist, a specialist, and you're brought in, you only need one visit to go and do an initial assessment about Parkinson's. After that, you go to clinical tests, right? But you can start to find that there's a Parkinson's. You don't bring somebody back 10 times to figure out if somebody has Parkinson's. You're treating them.
Exactly. And that brings even more concerns. Now, with all these concerns, there's conversations about the 25th Amendment, which most likely how Biden chose his nominees, he is not going to have a 25th Amendment claim pulled, because especially if that's pulled so late in the game, there's going to be large questions about the electability, and it spirals down and makes a horrible narrative to them. While personally, it's a problem to have Biden there, and he should not be leading the country. I even personally sit on the fact where I don't want it. It's a very sad day that our first female president's elected because of the incompetency of her original running mate, the one who she called out on the elections trail. It's a balancing act, and especially the Democrats love to do this balancing act between everything.
Well, I remember in 2020, they said that Joe Biden had to pick a black woman.
Exactly.
And he said, okay, there you go. There's a black woman. And not a good one. That's what the polling seems to indicate. But he picked one. So somebody was saying that she would be the first DEI president. And that's according to what the Democrats said, that it didn't matter what her qualifications were. She really didn't have any. She's not even a good campaigner, but she's a black woman. So, and then you know what the Democrats are saying just the other day when someone said that in the media? They said, "Oh, that's racist." Really? Yeah.
Exactly. They like to point at the Republicans and say we're the racist ones, but the most of the racist rhetoric that we see comes from the Democratic Party, and 5 years down the road, they're going to look back and they're going to say, "Oh, that was racist," and then they're going to try to change the narrative and push it back on the Republicans. Oh, the Republicans made us say that.
Yeah, the devil made me do it. That's what they.
And for those who are watching, and most independents and Republicans, even if they have not been following the news closely, are always watching. Some voters have a long memory, and especially even those outside of the politicos specifically. And if you're watching this is just continuing to show the degradation of the Democratic Party and show their own bad decisions.
Yes, and I think that the thing that really eats Democrats right now is the fact that they wanted the entire election to be about Donald Trump. That's what they thought they were going to be able to pull off, that they could sort of rig the whole election to be a trial of Donald Trump, whether actual trials or just a trial in the court of public opinion, even though the legal processes against him are largely bogus and corrupt, as donors figured out. But it's not working. Here's a great example of this. So I'll post two things. The NRCC highlighted an article about Val Hoyle saying Biden is still the best choice. Well, somebody caught up with Val Hoyle and actually just strolling along the sidewalk, I think in DC someplace, and asked her what she thought of Joe Biden. Is he mentally competent? Is he fit for office? And she tried to ignore them, and then she turned around, got in the face of the camera person and said, "Is Donald Trump fit for office?" They're going to keep trying to do that. That is their only strategy, is to keep talking about Donald Trump. But it's really tough because you know who the current president is? The person with the actual decision-making power, the person that they've actually nominated. It's Joe Biden. Donald Trump isn't deciding anything and is not responsible for all these problems that have come up under Joe Biden. Joe Biden is, and they think they can continue talking about Donald Trump. This whole thing has blown up because he can't win now, is what they're worried about. And it's changed the entire narrative. It shifted it from Donald Trump over to Joe Biden. And I'm actually almost thinking that if it weren't for the vice presidential pick, I'd almost not want a Republican National Convention right now. I'd want all the focus to stay on Joe Biden, the best thing Joe Biden can do is shut up and hide during the Republican National Convention, which is what you usually do, because it's really not a smart idea to pick a fight within a coliseum full of people cheering for your opponent. That may not stop Joe Biden, because he said the most insane things. Remember the dark Brandon thing he did, where he took military people and dark red and gave these weird speeches? He may not be able to resist it.
Especially tied with this, Biden has been, I'm the candidate who's going to save all democracy. And there was a recent poll that was just done on the 26th of last month. 38% of voters trust Trump to handle and protect democracy, compared to 29% who trust Joe Biden.
And that number is going to go down because of the abuse now.
It's going to continue to go down.
Yeah.
Joe Biden has continued to make these messages that Trump is the true enemy of democracy, and continuing to see Trump is not the one who's in power, and continuing to degrade it. And nothing that he has done, to my knowledge, has continued to brought the destruction of of democracy, even though we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic.
Yeah.
And that entire conversation even gets funner when you
But you pointed out earlier, I think, that the DNC delegates to the convention, the ones who might get a chance to potentially consider an alternative to Joe Biden, are sinking into a state of grief over the fact that Biden is their nominee. That is either going to be the biggest snoozer convention of all time, with people doing fake clapping, like, it's like it'll applause, clap now for Joe Biden. Yay, Joe Biden.
Do the jazz hands for the people with special sensories.
That's right. They'll just do the snaps. Who was it that was famous for the snaps?
It just reminds me of the Socialist Democrats convention that they did in California.
I know. And so the thing is, Biden is going to be awful. Kamala Harris is going to be even worse. They're going to look bad. And then outside the convention, they're going to have legions of Hamas supporters beating on the windows, clashing with cops. And people are going to look at that and say, I'm not so sure they're good for democracy. Those look like rioters to me. And those people are going to be demanding that Joe Biden stop supporting Israel and take the side of the terrorists, the murderous terrorists from October 7th. So I think that it's a witch's brew. It's going to be stirred up big time. And the Democrats try to play the victim. They try to switch the narrative back to what they want. And I think they have lost control of the narrative because of this debate, which is the worst thing, because they know that the only thing that matters, J.P. Sears, one of my favorite comedians, said, because we know that the most important thing isn't the truth, it's the narrative. It's very true. Now, speaking of the RNC, it starts on Monday. And on Monday, we will see the Republicans making their case to the country. The Democrats don't do anything for almost 5 or 6 weeks, I think. And that's, I want to come back to that in a second, what some revelation around that's interesting. But now Nikki Haley, Donald Trump, not on the best terms, but even Nikki Haley, who stayed in the race in the primary for a long time and kind of irritated some folks when it was appeared to be over, is they're unifying. She said that she's supporting him, and she's encouraging her delegates to back him, despite the fact that she's not one of the invitees to the convention. You're seeing all this stuff that looked like divisiveness in the primary turn into unity. We're going in the right direction. I think the Democrats are going in the exact opposite direction. And you know what's going to set people off? You know what's going to happen on August 7th, at least according to the current schedule. Democrats are going to be holding a special virtual convention roll call. The reason why they're doing it is because initially they had to do it in order to make sure that they could meet the deadline to get on the ballot in the state of Ohio for the general election, because their convention was too late. It was like 2 weeks too late for that. However, Ohio changed their statute and moved it to September. So problem solved. No more problems with states that have deadlines that don't work for the Democrats. But they are still going to hold their virtual roll call on August 7th, which would essentially make the convention itself
Sweet.
it will not be an actual casting of votes, delegates for Joe Biden. It will be that'll have taken place on August 7th, and everybody else will show up and dutifully be ordered to clap for Joe Biden as they sit there and waste 3 days ranting and raving and trying to change the subject back to Donald Trump.
Well, and it's we're seeing this, and it's making things obsolete. We've had these conversations about conventions in the past and what's going to happen with these conventions. And even with the vice presidential pick, which Trump has signaled that he's going to announce at convention or just barely before,
Yeah,
has super high contenders for it. And even just on within Sean Hannity's show, confirmed that 4 people are being in consideration for it, that Hannity listed off a list of names. And then you're having groups, newspapers like Politico, who's basically saying Doug Burgum has guaranteed that he is getting that, when Burgum has continued not to comment one way or another.
yeah.
While we're on the subject of convention, to do a little bit plug for YRO, we have 5 members who are actually going to the convention.
Of the Young Republicans?
The Young Republicans of Oregon. We have 2 honorary members and 3 full-time members going. 4 of those are delegates, and the 5th, one of our honorary members, is being an assistant with Tracy Honnell. Calvin Bennett, Tanner Elliott, Kevin Moss, Cherie Brady, and Sarah Phillips are all going to the convention as YRO members. So we're very excited that we're one of the few states that got to actually send delegates to, and the Young Republican National Federation was incredibly excited to see that we had 5.
That's really great. Yeah. And I think, what is there, a total of, is it 33 delegates for the entire delegation? I believe that's something on that order.
I think so. And I think I actually forgot one. Chris Gray is also going as one of our delegates. So I think we're up to 6, maybe.
Great. That's great. Well, I mean, and it's an event, an experience you'll always remember. And yeah, it is a 4-day infomercial. It's highly produced. The Republican one is still a real convention. The Democrat one is going to be a fake convention plus a riot outside. So I just think they made their bed. They're going to have to lie in it. While we're going to be out there talking about how a bright future for the country, Joe Biden's going to be trying to claim that his predecessor is worse than he. And by every metric on every issue, Joe Biden's losing. Every issue, Joe Biden is underwater. Even the one, like you mentioned, that they supposedly owned, which is defending democracy. When it comes to the economy, when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to the border security, Joe Biden is deep underwater by double digits. And it's, I think, unrecoverable in that regard. By the way, Joe Biden's not going to become a more cognitively competent person in 6 weeks or 2 months or 3 months. You're not going to look at him and say, wow, he sure has turned a corner. Now he's the old Joe Biden. That's not happening. The old Joe Biden is gone. He can't come back. They can't give him more drugs without, him starting to tweak out. Maybe that's what we're seeing, actually. So, and he won't take drug tests. He won't let his doctor tell the truth about what he's doing. But having said that, it couldn't happen to a nicer party. They've earned this. And of course, all the stuff they did with these legal actions, these attempts to indict and convict Trump, are all sort of on ice. Even the sentencing is delayed for the one set of convictions that they try to push through on the business records, hush money payment with Stormy Daniels, and the perjurer who used to be Trump's lawyer, who they claimed was telling the truth. Now he's telling the truth. He was lying before. Now he's telling the truth. So you should believe him now, because we like what he's saying. All that stuff, they've fired all their guns on that. It's over. And the immunity decision by the Supreme Court, which, by the way, I think is not gonna be needed by Donald Trump as much, not just because he'll be elected, but because I think he has a golden opportunity to overturn almost any of these convictions on appeal after the election. But Joe Biden might be the one that needs some presidential immunity, because some of the stuff that he's doing, particularly with the border and with shipping people around the country and hiding information, and some of his foreign policy decisions, could well put him in legal jeopardy, to name a few. Not to mention the fact that they've been obstructing Congress and hiding information from the public with regard to his activities. I just think it's pretty obvious that Joe Biden probably did a little jig like, "Yay, Trump bad. Yay, I'm not going to jail." At least for that, Hunter, not so much.
No, exactly. We're seeing all this, and as we've continued to talk, the Democrats are continuing to show corruption. That you had the third top DOJ official drop down to be an assistant DA to take on this case in New York. I totally agree with you that I think President Trump, when he goes on appeal on the legal basis, especially around some of these cases that we've seen large ineptitude for and new legal theory on the trial court level that has never been used before, will continue to help us bring this forward. And that new legal theory specifically is pointing back to the 34 counts in the New York case, where it was, you didn't have to agree on which additional crime he committed. You just all had to agree that he additionally committed a crime.
Yeah. We don't know what the jury vote actually was on what. We don't know. It's a feeling, which means that they can drive a Mack truck through that on appeal, and it'll easily be dispensed of. But Biden is going to have to pardon a lot of people. I think one of the people he's going to have to pardon Mayorkas. I think he's going to have to pardon Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland, I don't know if that vote's happened yet, but there's a vote pending in the House of Representatives to hold him in inherent contempt, which means that for failing to turn over the audio of the special counsel Robert Hur, who said something that now looks like almost unnecessary to have proof for, that Joe Biden was not brought up on charges for a crime he actually did commit, as the evidence shows, because intent has to be proven. And Joe Biden is an old man with a poor memory. And you remember when they went ballistic, the Democrats, they're not saying that anymore. That lie doesn't work anymore. But I wonder how far and how long Merrick Garland is going to protect audio tapes that are going to prove the obvious about Joe Biden. I just wonder. We may also find out just how accurate written transcripts are, because that might be the bigger problem, is if the DOJ deep sixed a bunch of information that makes Joe Biden look unelectable prior to that debate. You know who should be really angry about that? Democrats, who got stuck with Joe Biden for like 2 more months when they could have maybe started this discussion and process back when they got to hear the actual audio of him fumbling and bumbling and forgetting the year his son passed away and when he was vice president. Just amazing stuff. Hey, but there were some other issues I think you wanted to try and get to here, and we got a little bit of time left. One of them was about the big news from the Supreme Court regarding the Grants Pass decision and the implications for Oregon. Why don't you go ahead and give us a summary about that?
Well, I will be more than happy to give a quick summary. To apologize, unfortunately, I'm getting stolen away pretty quickly in the next few minutes. But what's going on with the Grants Pass decision? This is the Supreme Court ruling that reversing the Ninth Circuit decision of the Boise decision that required that it was cruel and unusual punishment to not allow these people who are experiencing homelessness to be removed and fined for being on public land. And we have had Republicans and now a few Democrats joining here in Oregon to repeal Oregon's right to camp law, HB 3115, as well as we're having conversations and things coming out of San Francisco, where they're even praising this decision and is allowing them to continuing and going back into fines, even though they're ideologically against it.
Yeah, the city of Portland actually passed ordinances in which they wanted to begin clearing encampments, and so this is technically a positive ruling for them, but there is a state law that enshrined the Grants Pass decision in state statute. So there is still a bill Ed Deal talked about last night, which has to be repealed in the state of Oregon in order to enable cities to take advantage of the Grants Pass ruling. It's ironic. One of the cities that will not be able to take advantage of the Grants Pass ruling is the Grants Pass, because it in effect reversed in large part the Boise decision that took place several years ago that said you just couldn't do it. You had to let people camp on public land unless you had public land set aside on which they could go and encamp, and then you could move them there. In effect, that just made it so that people just gave up trying to do anything about it. Now, there's been some reaction, as you mentioned, San Francisco. I'm posting these in the feed right now, and there are Oregon Democrats are joining Republicans in calling for camping law changes. So there are people who want to go and roll back the 2021 House Bill 3115, which is, again, another admission that they were wrong and that people hate their policies. It's a great campaign issue, and maybe it's a little too late to do something about it. Mark Meek, who won his Senate race by just like hundreds of votes, and it was like $6 million was spent between him and Bill Kemmer. Yeah, and then Paul Evans, the famous author, Paul Evans, who they're both saying that they need to change these laws. You know, they could have done that during something called the state legislative session. They both had the ability to put in bills. They want credit now for doing something after it looks like a bad idea. Amazing. It's amazing.
And it is just awing to see. Well, I totally apologize. I do actually have to really.
Yeah, I know. We can wrap up right now. I know that you mentioned about that in the 4th district, this became an issue too, and there was comments by both candidates on that. That's Val Hoyle and Monique Despain. And, you know, I'm glad there's a real debate going on this issue, but I know that they've got to stop federal money from flowing to this nonsense, because that's just adding fuel to the dumbest ideas on the planet, which Oregon seems to be able to achieve. Andy, thank you for joining me here tonight. I know it was on short notice. It's a lot of fun, and we got to do this again because you did a great job assembling all these stories, and that not only is an enormous help to me in producing the show, but also it shows that you're one of the people that are switched on and know what's going on, and would love to have you back on again, because folks can't get this kind of opinion anywhere else on a regular basis in the state. And thank you for joining us here tonight.
No problem. If you got questions, don't hesitate to text me. For many of those who saw me when I ran, my phone number is public. You can just search up my name. You'll find my phone number. I'm always willing to answer a text or a call if I do.
And young Republicans should check out YRO.org, and they can contact you if they want to find out more about how to get involved. Right?
Exactly. If you want to go get involved with the Young Republicans of Oregon, don't hesitate to contact secretary@YRO.gop, or you can go to our website, YRO.gop.
Great. Thank you for correcting me on that, YRO.gop. Thanks again for joining me here tonight. Thanks to all of you for joining, and please share this show with everyone you can. Lots of folks need to hear this, and they need to know there's a bright future with young Republicans like Andy Huey. So anyway, we'll see you tomorrow night on the next episode of the Captive Audience. It'll be Sunny and Don, and